How y'all doing? It is Power Hour. We're here. Michael is with me. He's on this side. Camera's over here. And our good friend Nate Hare, who you guys have seen in some of our content this week, is also with us. So, we're going to be talking about some retirement accounts and the creative ways that folks are using them in today's market. Michael, Nate, welcome.
Thanks for having us. Me.
I'm happy to be here as always, of course. Oh man, I forgot we're dealing with the super bright hat today. Okay. All right.
Washing everything else out.
I forgot my hat. I need a hat.
We'll get you a hat.
Wait, go back to Michael's shot real quick.
Oh no.
What's Michael?
What's
Super
wrong?
latte, vente, mocha.
Oh, that's
frappa?
just jet fuel. Yeah, that's black coffee.
Super black coffee. I like it.
After the late night last night, we had to use whatever boosts we could get. So kind of doubled up on the caffeine today. But I don't think we'll need any of it now because we're going to have a super exciting conversation about retirement accounts. But that's a little bit in jest. To be honest, after I talk with Nate and the Directed IRA team and Matt and all of them, it's like I've never been so jazzed for retirement at 31 years old. There's actually a lot of exciting aspects.
But isn't that kind of the point? Is as we learn about the tools, we learn that it's not just something that we're putting off for 20 years, but something we can take advantage of now. The HSAs, the ESAs, there's like really, really cool things that you can do with the accounts where it will impact now, not just later, not just putting funds, not just dollar cost average stock purchasing. It's really a dynamic, different thing.
Right. I just have to wait 28 more years to benefit from it. But man, is that a good amount of time to build something?
But the ESAs and HSAs is like an exception to that, right? Like
100%.
So I want to get into that, but just real quick for all of you who are following us on socials, Michael and I had the opportunity to go to Las Vegas last week, and we were with our mastermind community, and just wanted to give a shout out the Wealthy Code. You and I got to meet like one of our heroes, George Anton. And if you guys have not read this book, The Wealthy Code, this is definitely one folks have got to read. George Anton, find it on Amazon.
It's like $20. It's really not that expensive, and it's much more of a guidebook handbook rather than a novel or a story or anything like that. So I probably reference this book at least once a week, just in terms of making sure we're kind of working through the financing of a deal properly. But this is also, The Wealthy Code is just the first book in his series. And one of the cool things about what he was talking about out there kind of made the room realize that we're not actually in the real estate business. We're in the finance business. And real estate is the vehicle we use to achieve our financial goals. So that was super cool. But generally speaking, The Wealthy Code is arguably one of the best books you could read if you're trying to start a business and build generational wealth. So check it out.
Exactly. Great opportunity to be with some like-minded individuals. If you do not have a community like that around you, let's talk. There's opportunities to be involved with communities like this. If you're just getting started, there's opportunities to be involved with communities like this if you're growing and scaling a business. So again, like we know a lot of really great people, but if you don't have a circle of folks around you, especially as we enter, 2024, will it become more volatile? Will it become more challenging? I think, what we've seen in the last half of 2023 is that operators who have systems, who have been more effective, are continuing to win, and those who don't have those things in place have struggled a bit. So not meant to say other than we're always looking for great operators. We're always looking to expand that community, and we'd love to share some points of view with that. I think our next meeting is in early Q1. I think it's like the third week in January or something. So if you guys were interested in joining us, we'd be happy to share some things with you.
Yeah. I mean, one of the cool things about these events is that we get to bring a pretty unique speaker, at least one to each event. So obviously George was with us just the other week, but in July, we actually had Nate and his buddy Matt Sorensen and the Directed IRA team come out and teach us all about retirement accounts. So you said to tee you up, so I'm going to put you on the spot here. What was it like talking about directed IRAs in a mastermind like this, where you're dealing with a bunch of operators, not a bunch of passive investors?
I love it because a lot of times it's the easiest group to talk to. one of the most difficult things with self-directed IRAs is not getting the concept across to people, but it's setting self-directed accounts up for people that can actually find their own investments. We have clients that get really excited about self-directed IRAs. They open and fund an account, but they can't find an investment. The thing with the operators is they're already conditioned on how to find investments. So they're the easiest people to talk to.
Good to know that we're holding up our end of the bargain here, because I got to tell you, sometimes I'm a little confused on it all as well. But that's why the custodians are there, to really take over all of the difficult stuff and make sure that you're just understanding things high level, signing proper docs and proper order of operations.
Here's the other thing with operators too is even for your guys like yourself, you guys are out there actively raising private money. So for operators, it's twofold. It's not just what do I do with my retirement account, but what do I do with other people's retirement account? Because that's a huge source of private capital. So if you can understand self-directed IRAs as an operator, the easiest way to understand it is by directing your own IRA, but that will open the door for you to go talk to other people about using their self-directed IRAs as a private capital source.
Ed, you've been doing this for quite some time, educating people on retirement accounts and having discussions about using those funds to lend on projects. Can maybe just talk quickly about how you approach that conversation and when the right time to approach that conversation is when you're trying to educate and utilize someone's available retirement funds that they want to invest in?
Well, with directed accounts like the self-directed accounts, the ESAs, the solo 401ks, things like that, there are some specific moments where making one choice or another are important. So we talked about this last night. One of those points is at the time of a job transfer is a really important point that people make a specific set of decisions. For example, we live in Charlotte. It's a banking town. So it's pretty common for one of our friends to move from, say, Wells Fargo to Bank of America, or from Bank of America to Wells Fargo. And in the course of their careers, actually, it's kind of required for you to go from one to the other to kind of move up as your career path is going. It's very, very logical for someone when they leave, in our scenario, they're leaving Wells Fargo and they're going to Bank of America. So when they leave Wells Fargo, it's very common for them to roll over their retirement accounts from whatever custodian Wells Fargo is using to whatever custodian Bank of America is using. However, that's really, from what we understand about retirement accounts, probably a mistake, in that when you're with an employer, your plan may be locked and you may not have a whole lot of options. And so if you continually take the funds you have from one employer, roll them over to your next employer, lock them there again, yes, all the funds are in one place, but you don't have the flexibility to do a lot of the things that we actually learn about in the self-directed IRA handbook. And remember, the only restricted transactions in your self-directed IRA accounts are, Nate, keep us honest here, are life insurance policies and collectibles. And so if you think about the world of possible investments, if every time when you're moving from one employer to another, you're rolling those funds over to the employer plan, you're really removing a whole universe of possible options for yourself. One last point on that, and then I'll get off the soapbox about it, but people often look at it as if it's either stocks or alternative investments, where with our self-directed plans, we can still invest in stocks. It doesn't exclude that as an investment class. It just includes and all the others. And so that's one of the biggest mistakes I see. So one of the things, holding up the book again, one of the things we love to do in our business is anytime I see someone who's a good friend of ours on social media talking about changing employers and things, I know there's a window of time they're going to have to make a decision. So we'll send them this book. Say, hey, I'd love for you to review this. I'd love for you to better understand the principles that are taught in the book. And then, hey, would it be okay if we have lunch 2 weeks from now to discuss the options with that? So I don't know. That to me is the biggest mistake that people are making out there when they're full-time employed. They're not operators in the business like you and I, and they're just trying to be efficient with where their capital is.
Right. I think for most people too, including myself, when I went to school, I was conditioned to think that how you save for retirement is to work for a company, put 10% of your earnings in your 401k, let someone else invest it for you, and that's how you retire. And I think that's how most people think that's how retirement works. But if you ask people, it's not that easy. You have to figure out a way to invest your way to retirement. It's so hard, especially with the cost of living now, to save your way to retirement. And that's what people are used to doing. You got to find a way to invest. And like Ed was saying, the IRS doesn't limit us as to what we're allowed to invest in. There's only two things you can't invest in with an IRA or 401k. It's life insurance contracts and collectibles. So everything else is fair game. You just have to find a company like Directed IRA. If you want to do alternative investing, if you want to buy rental property, if you want to do private lending, you have to do that through a company like us and not Fidelity. But here's the other thing that was interesting to me, and this is just my nerdy IRA brain kicking in. When you actually look at the numbers, when you look at IRAs and 401ks as a whole, the larger the value the retirement account is, the more percentage of alternative asset it holds. And
so say that again so we make sure we grab that.
The higher the value of the retirement account is, the more alternative assets are within that account.
So the more wealth someone has in one of these accounts, the more likely and the higher percentage they have investments other than stocks, bonds.
We call them alternative assets.
Yep.
Basically, an alternative asset, anything outside of Wall Street. Anything outside of Wall Street is considered an alternative asset. So there was actually a study done in 2016. The IRS did an audit, and basically all the IRAs valued below $5 million, only about 2% of those IRAs held alternative assets. Above $5 million, 25% of the assets are alternative assets. So that's a huge difference. So what does that tell you? That just tells you that the rich and the wealthy understand that alternative assets are a good asset class to invest in, but the average Joe Schmo, we're not taught that. We're not taught to invest in other things other than stocks and bonds.
And we were talking about this last night after the event, but part of the reason that the funds in these retirement accounts or the 401ks that are provided by employers are locked is because a lot of investors aren't savvy enough to be going out and doing these things on their own, and it kind of protects their downside, even though it's limiting their upside. So one of the things here is a self-directed IRA still not may be for everybody, especially if you are someone who is not an active investor. Because as we were talking about last night, just because you have money in a self-directed IRA account, if you're not actively deploying that money, it's not earning anything. You're earning less than a checking account. So you have to be someone who is actively seeking a more active investment lifestyle, or at least want to have more control over your investments. But if you're someone who's not very savvy and wants kind of a hands-off approach, the self-directed may not be the best choice for them. But that should probably be an indicator that maybe they should educate themselves a little more on some other things to do.
Sure. There's definitely an avatar for a good self-directed IRA investor. And I would say probably three things. One, they're entrepreneurial. They want to get out there. They want to invest on their terms. The other thing is they're educated or their knowledge base lies somewhere else other than the stock market. So, and I run into this all the time. I mean, a real estate operator is going to know how to make more money in real estate than the stock market in most cases.
Sure.
If you're knowledgeable about something, know that your IRA can be invested in what you're knowledgeable about. And the other thing I think is key is you don't have to have deals, but you have to have access to deals. Meaning, if you don't have deals yourself, at least have a network of people that can provide you deals, because once you set up an account with Directed IRA, we don't have investments to sell you. You're kind of on your own. So the keys are in your hand. You got to be responsible with it. But like you said, it's not for everybody because not everybody has those skill sets.
Right.
We had the opportunity last night, Nate. First, thanks for coming out to the meetup last night. Really appreciate it. I think it was really appreciated by the community locally. So thanks for making the trip. Thanks for sharing some points of view.
Thanks for having me.
I know you get an opportunity to have conversations about how to take relatively small account sizes and grow them pretty substantially through the vehicle of real estate. You've talked about that a lot. What was maybe one of your takeaways from last night, or one of the things you loved sharing last night?
I got a lot of good feedback from, the creative investment strategies. And the good thing is, I think the audience that you brought in they weren't newbies per se. I mean, there was a lot of people that were getting into real estate, but most people understood the lingo when I talk about, buying property subject to seller financing. For the most part, they understood that. But the key with those strategies is those strategies can play within an IRA. And the one that I love the most is if you're going to take a small amount of money and use some creative leverage or creative financing technique with a small investment capital and a large return, even if it takes a little bit of time, those are great investments to put on the shelf in a Roth IRA. Like I kind of mentioned, I have a client that bought 5 properties subject to all subject to the underlying financing. He just took title to the property, solved whatever problem that homeowner was having, whether they fell behind on their mortgage payments, couldn't pay their property taxes, lost their job. These were properties that had little to no equity in them, so everybody else was passing on the deals. He just saw that as an opportunity to say, hey, the rents in the area cover the mortgage. So if my Roth IRA can own this property with very little investment out of pocket, I can just rent this property out, and 20 years later, it'll be paid off by the renter. So he did it 5 times with $70,000, and in 10 years, all those 5 properties will be paid off, and they'll be roughly around a $4 million Roth IRA with no additional contributions, no additional investments. He's not day trading to get there. He just bought 5 deals in his town, subject to small investment up front, and he's going to have a pretty decent retirement once he hits 59 and a half.
And for the benefit of those who are watching, the investments on those are in the neighborhood of like
15,000,
yeah, maybe $18,000 on one, maybe 12,000 on another. Those are the entry prices, right? Because those are the down payments, the reinstatements, whatever he needed to pay.
Right, exactly. And then the other one was the seller finance deal. Where I had a client, $5,000, carried back a note to the seller who owned the properties free and clear, and his Roth IRA was the buyer. His Roth IRA held the note. His Roth was the borrower on the note. Rented the properties, paid off the note through selling a piece of the property, and
retain the other 2 free and clear.
The other 2 free and clear. So it's really just about changing your mindset as an investor and saying, hey, I've got a creative investment strategy that I understand. I can either do all of these creative investment strategies in my name or my LLC and pay taxes every single year, or I could take some of these deals and maybe some of them even fit better in my Roth IRA that fit maybe even a little long term. So what I always like to tell people is the investments you put in your retirement account, even if you're a real estate investor or operator, they don't have to be the same type of investments you do to put food on the table. Those can be completely different strategies. And again, your IRA is one of the greatest and easiest ways to grow wealth completely tax-free, because that's how they're set up, is they're not taxpayers.
In fact, probably the more mundane and more kind of mediocre deal where you're not generating a whole lot of equity initially, where you're not generating a whole lot of cash flow initially, fit very well, place it in your plan. Like you said, put it up on the shelf and just let time in the market do its job.
Yeah.
It's like both sides of the bookshelf. It's like you want the deals that are thin, that are going to grow very long over time with fixed structured debt. Then you also want to put the ones in the IRA that are the huge equity plays.
Bingo.
Where I'm buying it at 200, but it's currently worth 350. I already have 150,000 of equity that's going to grow tax-free. In that
We're
account.
avoiding Uncle Sam as our silent third partner might be beneficial, right? Like those deals.
So I'm going to redirect here because we got a question.
Yeah, let's do it.
First question is, how do you use directed IRAs in your business, and where do you find the lenders? So I think we covered the first part of that. How do you use directed IRAs, right? You're talking to people in job changes. You're working with people who already have accounts that want to invest passively as a lender. These are definitely ways we utilize it in our business, and other people do as well. But I can't ask Nate this question, but I'm going to ask you, how do you find those lenders? What are you doing to find them outside of looking on Facebook for job changes? Because that's an excellent way, but that's kind of one-off. You're reactionary instead of proactive. How can you be a little proactive in finding private lenders in the self-directed space?
Yeah. I think one thing we've done a good job of is there are, educational events that any number of these custodians put on, and being present at those is obviously valuable. You and I when we're in those spaces, are again a little bit unique, and it's kind of nice to be, folks who have the deal flow and have the ability to operate and kind of can show a track record. You just got to be in Raleigh at the Self-Directed IRA Summit, and that was a really great opportunity to do that. But even short of doing like some of those level events, there's social media groups associated with this sector, this effort, and there's individuals who are looking for operators like us. There's operators like us who are looking for capital to place. And one last way maybe we do this as well is, again, a little bit of conversion. So there are folks out there who have funds in retirement accounts at a more traditional custodian, a Fidelity as an example, and they don't actually know the process of how to get those funds from a Fidelity to someone like a directed IRA, and then get the funds available to lend to someone like you. And so a little bit of hand-holding has existed over the last couple of years to do that. So we'll, hey, there's some really great companies out there. One of the teams you might want to speak with is the team at Directed IRA. Why don't you have a call with them, see if that's a fit for you? If it is, we've definitely worked with them before, and that's been productive as well.
I think just to kind of double down, even in those examples that you're giving right there, those sound like people who are already interested in lending. And finding private lenders that are already interested in lending and doing it already is great. Utilize it immediately, but just remember, they've probably been established for a while. They're running it like a business. They have different requirements, different expectations, all that type of stuff. So one of the things is you should be educating people about this, even when you're just talking about them private lending from the beginning, right? So if you're talking with someone who says, yeah, I have 200 grand to lend, I can wire it as soon as you need. That's great. But you should still be telling them, hey, I mean, the fact that you have 200 grand in a checking account is unbelievable. Great for you. But I want to make sure you're aware of the ability to tap your other retirement capital if that's something that you're interested in. So people who are willing to lend outside of their retirement account may not know that they can lend from within their retirement account. And just because they're already a potential private lender doesn't mean you can't make their lending experience a million times better by putting them into a self-directed space. So just talking to anyone about private lending, just educate them on the self-directed side. Don't seek out self-directed in and of itself. You're leaving a lot of, runway, kind of cutting it off short.
I'll tell you a way that you probably can find self-directed IRA investors.
Oh boy, here's the gem. Let's go.
Run a title search. Run a title search and find all the owners that have FBO in the vesting.
And why would that be something to search for in the county record?
Because when self-directed IRA companies take title to property, they take title in the name of the IRA. And it usually reads the custodian, which is us. So for instance, directed IRA or directed trust company. FBO stands for the benefit of, and it usually will follow with the client's name or account number. So this is pretty standard across the industry for all self-directed IRA companies. So if you wanted to do some mailers, I would say search everything FBO in your county and start sending out mailers. So you at least know this is a person that has a self-directed IRA. They at least like real estate because they own real estate in there, and potentially they might have some extra money in their self-directed IRA to be a lender. So there's that way, but there's also money everywhere. I mean, if you're going to actually look for private money, I mean, it's at the grocery store. I mean, it's at your church, your local RIAs, at the real estate networking groups. There's a lot of good Facebook groups out there that are always talking back and forth about deals, and they have self-directed IRAs. So it's more prevalent than you think. And, the number that you want to remember is that there's $14 trillion just in IRAs. And those are the easy ones to get. Because once it's IRA, you can get it to a self-directed account. If it's 401k, it might be a little bit hard. So it's out there.
Oh, man.
Did we have any other questions?
Yeah, we've got some more questions. I was just kind of sprinkling them in. Okay. Are there any restrictions on the types of real estate investments allowed within a self-directed IRA?
Let's let Nate hit that one directly.
Yeah, no. The IRS doesn't care about what you invest in. They don't even care about where you invest. I mean, you can buy property on the moon if you found property on the moon. The only thing that they really
I need to get on Elon's list there. Yeah.
The only thing that you want to be aware of is the IRS more cares about who you invest with. There are certain people your IRA cannot transact with. Right? I can't transact with myself if it's my IRA, because any money I take out of my IRA to myself, that's a distribution. I can't tell my IRA to make a loan to me. IRS have already figured that out. You're not sneaking by anybody. But there's also myself. I can't do deals with myself. My IRA can't do deals with my spouse, my parents, my kids, and any companies those people own or control. So it's really just specific family members. And the reason that they disqualify those people is those are the people that usually either they're the owner of the IRA or they're going to soon inherit the IRA. So outside of the people, it's really open game. I mean, the general rule of thumb is, as an investment, if you could take title to the investment, if you could drop a purchase contract to buy it, your IRA can be the buyer.
And just one point of clarification. The reason, of course, that these self-directed IRAs, particularly Roth IRAs, are so enticing is because they more or less eliminate taxes. Um, don't confuse that with a 1031 exchange where it's deferring taxes, where you're going to be paying it at the end. And in a 1031 exchange, there are restricted transactions. It has to be like kind, all that type of stuff. But within a self-directed IRA, you're not under that same framework. So I just wanted to clarify. Yes, there are two different strategies on about tax deferment or elimination, but the optics and the ability to transact within them are completely different. Okay. Should we go with another question, or do you have something to add in?
No, let's hit the questions because I want to make sure that we're getting those.
Perfect. Okay. Okay. So the question is, can I partner with others in real estate deals with IRAs? So like essentially two lenders for one deal.
Yes, so that's pretty common actually to see multiple lenders. I on every loan that I've done, I've had multiple lenders on the note. Now that does not mean I have multiple liens. That's not multiple promissory notes. All that is when I use, let's say, my Roth IRA, a piece of my Roth IRA, I'll bring in a piece of my health savings account. Might be even bring in a coworker's account if they want to partner with me on a loan. All that really makes that note is just a fractionalized note.
The
right?
buzzword of Raleigh. Do you remember that? That we dove deep into fractionalized.
Yeah, fractionalized note. So we're all first lien position. Fractionalized meaning, we have a pro rata ownership of that note. So when the borrower pays back directed IRA, that interest payment gets split amongst the ownership percentages. And that's really a good way to get, especially if you're a family, if you've got husband, wife, you've got some kids, you should be partnering accounts together. A husband shouldn't just be self-directing his own Roth IRA and leaving wife and kids off to the side to fend for themselves. You should be looking at ways to partner your account, your spouse's account. We have educational savings accounts for kids that are great for partner. You have to partner those accounts because those are small accounts to begin with. So it's good to get those accounts involved. And a lot of times you have to get them involved through partnering. And you might even have multiple types of accounts. I mean, we have self-employed people that have a Roth IRA, and then they've got a solo 401k or a Roth IRA and a SEP. I mean, there's 7 different types of accounts that you can self-direct. And I always tell people you should have every single account you can because those accounts don't pay taxes and you do. So get as many accounts as you can set up. They're tax shelters, partner them together, do them on the same investments or individual investments if you choose.
I think one thing to jump in on with here is it's also interesting that when someone's just learning about these products, they'll feel constrained because of the contribution limits, right? There's no limit on the amount of profit we can make in the accounts, but there are limits in our contributions depending on the type of account. Creating accounts in your spouse's name, in your children's names, the HSAs, the ESAs, this is one way to stretch the contribution limits that feel so constraining at first. And so the fact that people don't have a variety of accounts that they can use to partner with means they may not quite understand the contribution limits and how to push up against it.
And we had a great question last night. A gentleman had a wife that was getting huge bonuses.
Yep.
And they were trying to figure out what to do with this additional cash influx that they had. So, we'll just call it $100,000 bonus. They knew that they were going to have to pay taxes on that bonus because that's just income, right? There's nothing you can really do about that at that point. But what do you do with that money now? Do you want to keep investing it as a taxpayer and just continue to pay more taxes on that $100,000? Or do you want to start taking some of that money and making contributions to IRAs? Now, one of the limits that he had is like you said, Ed, is you can only put in, say, $7,000 into a Roth or $7,000 into a traditional, and maybe, $3,000 or $4,000 in an HSA. But if you start looking at doing a little bit to each account, right? And we're coming up on January 1st, where you can make contributions for next year as well. You can really double up on your contributions. So when you start really diving in and segmenting the accounts out and maximizing your contributions to all of them, you could get a large amount of money in there. You just got to think outside the box and get out of the mindset of thinking about your own account and start thinking about other people's accounts.
And I'm in a very similar situation. I'm not getting those bonuses yet, thanks to my partner. But no, like I didn't come from corporate America. Like Ed worked in banking world for 20 years. Like he had a retirement account with a match, so like Ed can roll over. Ed was able to roll over. I'm starting from scratch. So in our world, we can make $10,000 on a transaction. I can't contribute $10,000 in a year to a single account. But if I'm married, if I have kids, the multiple accounts that I can contribute to, I could fill that up in other ways, just as Nate was saying. So creativity is the name of the game. And it's just cool to hear that I'm not limited to 7,000 a year.
It'll be 7,000 next year.
Next year.
Yep.
Okay.
I want to circle back to just one thing that I thought was really eye-opening last night, and people appreciate it.
Just one, huh?
We'll probably do more than one, but when we're talking about these types of accounts, we always think that it has to be, I'm just putting money in that I'm not going to get any advantage for until I'm 59 and a half, which is what's taught relatively well with all the marketing and all these different things. But that's not true, right?
It's true with an IRA.
Now, HSAs and ESAs are a huge competitive advantage. And Nate, I'd love for you just to share a little bit of how those accounts can actually affect our lives right now.
And I'm just going to add real quick that there is a difference between an ESA and a 529. The 529 is the one that most people have probably heard of. It's pretty much common. There is a difference between a 529 and an ESA. So I just wanted to make sure I clarified that before you deep dove in.
So there's two accounts that can be self-directed that aren't necessarily retirement accounts, but they are tax savings accounts. One would be the health savings account. Most people are familiar with a HSA. A lot of people have HSAs. Here's the interesting thing I find out about HSAs. People have them, but they don't even know they can invest them. Most people just use their HSA because you get an additional tax deduction by just making contributions to the HSA. So they think, okay, cool, I'm going to make a contribution to my HSA, write it off on my taxes. That's only tax benefit number one. Tax benefit number two is it can be invested, self-directed or otherwise, just like a traditional or Roth. All the investment growth is tax deferred. But then here's the third tax benefit is you can take distributions from your HSA, tax-free and penalty-free. You don't got to wait till retirement. You just have to take it out tax-free and penalty-free if you're using it to pay for qualified out-of-pocket health expenses, which is so broad. It's things like the things you pay for today: prescriptions, acupuncture, holistic medicines, copays, glasses, dental work, vision. I mean, all the things that families pay for with the money in their back pocket. That's probably the worst way to pay those expenses because that's off your earnings. So if you've got $10,000 of, let's just say, medical expenses, and you're using your earnings to try to pay for that, you got to go out and make $20,000 first, pay Uncle Sam, and then what you're left with, then pay those expenses. If I'm just switch my mindset as an investor, if I can make 10 grand as an investor and I've got medical expenses, now this is for me, spouse, and dependents. Doesn't matter who's on my insurance. Okay, it covers for me. If it's my HSA, I can take tax-free distributions to pay for myself, my spouse, and my kids. If I have an investment that will make 10 grand, or let's call it 20 grand, why would I not want to do that in my HSA so that I have $20,000 to pay for medical expenses instead of 10?
Without paying taxes on it.
Right, without paying taxes on it. Here's the other cool thing with an HSA, okay, that I don't necessarily get into, but I think it's worth noting. HSA, first, well, before I get to that, don't get HSA confused with FSA. Those two accounts get mixed up very often. The FSA, the flexible spending account, it's funny how they name these things. They name them usually the opposite of exactly how they work, right? So flexible spending account is so flexible that if you don't spend all the money by the end of the year, they take it from you.
I think we had something called an Inflation Reduction Act at some point this year.
Okay. So this is not an FSA. An HSA, you do not lose the money. You could continue to invest it. But here's the cool thing with an HSA. If, let's just say I have a HSA and you have to have a high deductible health plan in order to have the HSA. Just call your health insurance provider and ask them if your insurance will allow you to have it. But as long as I have the health insurance and my HSA in place, I can make contributions, let's say for another 10 years. Let's say I put $40,000 in 10 years in contributions. In the meantime, I do have medical expenses. Let's say I buy some glasses, I buy some prescriptions. Instead of taking the money out of the HSA, I can just pay it out of pocket and just save all the receipts. Because here's the cool thing with an HSA. I can just take a big fat distribution in the future out of my HSA to pay myself back for all the receipts in that drawer. And it doesn't matter how far I go out, as long as I've got the HSA in place. So I've seen people in retirement take a big fat distribution out of an HSA to pay themselves, reimburse themselves for medical expenses they paid, and take 20 grand out and buy a new car, or take 20 grand out and go to Europe.
Because you can do whatever you want with the reimbursement,
Right,
because
you're
that's
paying
your
yourself
money.
back. You're paying yourself back. So it's super cool with the HSA. So if you have a high deductible health plan, first of all, it's the number one account you should contribute to. You should contribute to your HSA before the Roth, because A, you get the tax deduction putting the money in there, and you could use the money right away if you need it.
And I want to make sure
this is so valuable with a kid on the way. Holy cow.
I want to make sure everyone's really, really capturing this, Nate. So I just want to be really specific here. So I'm employed at Bank of America today. I remember we just did my rollover. We were just talking about all that. So I'm employed at Bank of America today. I have whatever Blue Cross Blue Shield plan. Even with all that in place, I can come to the team at Directed and say, hey, I'd love you to be the custodian of my HSA. Can you help me out?
Yep.
And we're all playing within the same rules. We're in the right ball field. Everything's happening, right?
Yep.
Love
Yes,
this.
exactly. Can I do one more nerdy fun fact on
Yes,
HSAs
please.
that I don't get to talk about much?
Yes, please.
One time in your life, you can make a contribution to your HSA by just taking money out of your traditional IRA. Here's why that's important. Most people have a traditional IRA, whether it's rolled over from their 401k, but a traditional IRA is essentially pre-tax, right?
Right.
You take money out, you pay taxes no matter when you take it out. And if you take it out before 59.5, you pay the 10% penalty. Most people's emergency money is that old rollover IRA. If I need to use the money for a medical purpose, let's say I want to take out, $3 grand for a root canal. If I have that knee-jerk reaction to take $3 grand out of my traditional IRA, I pay taxes on $3 grand and the 10% penalty on $3 grand. But instead, I have one time in my life, I can just take $3 grand or whatever the contribution limit is for the year, just move it over to my HSA, and I can take it out of my HSA and it's tax-free and penalty-free. So I'm moving it from an account that I'm taxed on, that I'm penalized on,
right,
to an account that I can use today that I'm not taxed or penalized on.
This is why having people who are super smart on things like this is so important. Nate, that's a huge insight. I hope people are taking note of how
so
important
if you
this
have
is.
a traditional IRA, and you have the HSA, make sure you take advantage of that at some point. That's free money.
All right. Holy cow. Okay. Let's go to the other 3-letter one. Let's go to the ESA.
ESA. So ESAs are really cool. ESAs are a real niche product. Okay. It's an education savings account. Specifically, it's a Coverdell education savings account. It is different than a 529. I have nothing wrong against a 529 plan. Those are great. In the past, 529 plans were really just college savings plans. There really wasn't much of a savings plan that you can use or invest that paid for things before college, like pre-K, tuition, private school, books, computers, all those things, tutoring.
Got it.
But the ESA has always been this little known account that has been able to be self-directed. You set up a Coverdell education account for each of your kids. They have to be under the age of 18 for you to make a contribution. Okay, but as soon as they're born with a social security number, you should be setting up a Coverdell education savings account for your child. The contribution limits are relatively small. It's $2,000 per child per year. But if you've got 3 kids, that's $6 grand. And then January 1st, it's another $6 grand. But what you can do with it is phenomenal, because you can invest it into real estate and use creative real estate strategies. So I would say some of the real estate strategies that pay off quickly work better in your HSAs and your ESAs. Why? Because if the investment's going to pay quickly, you know that you can use the money quickly using those accounts.
So to connect it to our world, a wholesale deal.
Wholesaling, right? Wholesaling is a perfect one. I've had a lot of clients take newly established Coverdell education savings accounts, not even max out the contribution, throw $100 in the Coverdell, right? I gave an example yesterday. I had a client that had 4 kids, threw $125 in each Coverdell education savings account, give him a total capital of $500 he can use. He wholesaled a contract with all 4 of the ESAs as the buyers, okay? Processed that through us, the custodian. We sent the $500 earnest money to the title company. And then 8 weeks later, when the deal closed with an end buyer, those education savings accounts got the wholesale fee of 40 grand, okay? It didn't go to him, the taxpayer. It went to the Coverdell education savings accounts pro rata. So $125 investment, each gate got $10,000 each to those Coverdells, and that money will not be taxed provided he uses it to pay for education expenses, which are tuition, room and board, books, computers, and he puts his kids through private school.
I
So
was about to say, not just for college.
not
So-
just for college, this is pre-K all the way through
So
college
what are-
and trade school.
So say his expenses for a full year of school for the kids is 10 grand,
Mhm.
right? So we're saying he took $125 per child,
Mhm.
put it into an account,
Mhm.
made one set of decisions,
Mhm.
and just funded his kids' complete year of school
Mhm.
for $125 effectively.
With 8 weeks of work.
Let the silence sit for a second because I want one more time.
$500 and 8 weeks of work paid for 4 kids, private school for the entire year.
So when we're talking to folks and they're saying, "Hey, education is becoming difficult to afford," you know, we're not. We want our kids to have the best options. There are ways to really leverage this and make this work, and provide material differences today to your child's educational experience.
Yep. And here's the cool thing with the ESAs. I always get this question. So what happens when you've got money left over in one of your child's ESAs? Let's say they don't go to college for some reason, they pursue something else, or you've just built it up to a point where there's extra money. At the end of the road is whenever that child or that beneficiary reaches age 30. So you, as the responsible individual, can make one of two decisions. You can either let the child have the rest of that money, and it just comes out with a small 10% penalty. You can just give it to them, or you can just change the beneficial owner of that account to another child. So by the time that your child's 30, they might have a child. So you could just change the beneficial owner to the new child and keep the process going, paying for education expenses completely tax-free.
So to walk through this,
That sounds like generational wealth.
So to
almost.
it's really important we break this down. Let's take out multiple children. Let's say this is just one child.
Yep.
So we've funded one account with $500, and we've made $40,000 in that account. And for whatever reason, this young person is super capable. They're getting scholarships. So we never spend a dollar of that 40,000, right?
Mhm.
We never grow it any further. Let's just that one transaction the one time. Worst case scenario, this young person reaches an age. They don't have any, they don't have any children, all that. They can take $40,000 out
Mhm.
with a penalty of 10%,
Mhm.
$4,000,
Mhm.
right?
Yep.
And they're going to get $36,000
Yep.
from a one-time decision we made with $500 and 8 weeks of work,
Yes.
Tax-free.
tax-free.
Yeah. And then I would also tell that child, let's take some of that money and make a contribution to your Roth now. So that
First-
it's not taxed again.
There's a lot of other
Yeah.
we can do a lot of other things, but I mean, at the minimum performance of all of this is so incredible.
I mean, either way you look at it, it's less taxes than you would pay if you had done the investment in your name.
Amazing.
Paying 30 or 40% in taxes.
Amazing. So we can pay for educational expenses today.
Mhm.
We can pay for
Medical expenses.
medical
today.
expenses today.
Mhm.
So if we're out there and, we're looking to look, medical expenses are substantial.
Mhm.
And in fact, medical expenses lead to some of the most significant financial struggles that a lot of people face in life. So if we're out here trying to get Obamacare to cover what we're doing, and that isn't quite getting there, we can go to hair care and get all of our medical expenses covered.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
What's the name of that company?
Hair care.
Hair
I
care.
like
I like
that.
Yeah.
My new company.
If Obamacare doesn't get it, hair care is ready for it. But I mean, these strategies are just so important for families to understand, especially with young people. I mean, your abilities to make a couple of relatively minor, insignificant choices can have very substantial impacts on generational wealth.
Yeah. And I would just say if you're a real estate investor or some sort of investor or operator, you really want to analyze and look, how much money am I making that is more that exceeds my needs, right? You really should be doing enough deals in your personal name to just hit whatever your needs line is, whether that's 10 grand a month, 20 grand a month, 30 grand a month. But do enough deals to where you've got food on the table, you've got Christmas gifts bought, do a little vacation. But if you're just doing everything in your name, your LLC, you're really just working for the government. I don't care if you say you're self-employed because you're a taxpayer at that point. So, but you got to do some deals in your name to survive, but start looking at some plans that will let your money grow further, whether it's your Roth, your spouse Roth, the HSAs, the ESAs. But if you really focus on these plans, you'll start to realize that you've got more money saved that felt a little different than before, because that's the hardest thing for people to get to retirement, is because they just get eaten up with taxes. Money grows so slow when you lose 30 or 40% of your capital every single year.
Yeah. And it's interesting that kind of the two inputs that we've had, kind of these last couple of weeks is the wealth code, how to deal with inflation and manage inflation and tax implications, and then the self-directed IRA, how to offset tax implications on your growth, have been inputs that Michael and I have had in our business. These past 2 weeks, we've really been kind of hammered on this point.
Yeah, it feels like I've taken 4 years of college courses on it in 2 weeks, but what more could I ask for, really? Okay. My brain is still coming back to
Mike's
equilibrium.
got wheels turning right now.
Well,
I can tell.
We were talking about it last night.
Yeah.
Like, I'm still thinking about how that cold call went at 2 o'clock in the morning while I'm trying to fall asleep. So I have a hard time turning it off. But so I guess kind of going away from the plans that are offered, where does directed IRA come into play during a transaction? One of the questions here is, how does the custodian cover and manage the transaction within a directed IRA? So what would, like, I have money in an account.
Mm-hmm.
I want to do something with this money. Where does directed IRA come into play? What roles do you have? Which roles do you not have? Kind of tell people how easy it is to work.
Those are good questions. So really, we should come into play before you start making offers on investments. And here's the reason why. If you intend your Roth IRA or your HSA or ESAs for your kids to be the owner of the investment, you've got to have everything in the name of those accounts. So the first step is to just set up an account. Go online, go to directedira.com, set up an account. That way we can send you a welcome email that's got your vesting for your account. You're going to use that vesting as the buyer on whatever contracts that you're doing. Or if you're going to be a lender, it's going to be the lender on the note. But you need that titling so that we know it's going to ultimately be owned in your IRA. So first step is just get the account open. Second step is get the account funded. You can fund it one of three ways. You can just make a contribution. That's pretty common with ESAs and HSAs. Roths and traditionals, a lot of times people are transferring like from their Fidelity IRAs. That's usually the most common way they're funding that. And you don't have to move all the money, by the way. You don't have to move your entire IRA at Fidelity to a directed IRA. Same thing with 401ks. If you're moving your 401k, that's usually via rollover. But step two would be just funding the account. Step three is talk to whoever the custodian is, talk to our transactions department, I would say ahead of time. Let them know what you're going to be investing in so they can give you the proper form to fill out and the documents that we'll need. It's really, if I break it down real simply, the things that a custodian is going to need is they're going to need their internal form filled out, just you giving the custodian the authority to make the investment. There's a real estate form, there's a notes form. I mean, there's going to be a specific form. We always need that form, and then we need a copy of the agreement. Whatever the agreement is, if you're buying real estate, the first agreement is the sales contract. Okay, we need to sign the sales contract as the buyer. We don't negotiate terms. So this goes back to what don't we do? We don't negotiate the terms. You're still doing the same legwork. We're just signing the forms, okay, as the buyer. If you're doing a note, we need the form for a note, and then we need the promissory note. So whatever the agreement is, we just need the copy of that agreement so we can sign it. And one of the main things people need to understand is we're not sending you the money to go buy this on your own. We're usually sending the money directly to the title company or to the borrower. So we're going to need wiring instructions for that. So it's really very easy. Fill out our form, give us a copy of the contract, give us wiring instructions where we're sending it. And then ultimately what we do is we will safe keep whatever investment documents there are. So if we bought a house in the name of the Roth, we'll keep the warranty deed showing that the Roth IRA owns it, or we'll keep the promissory note. It's no different than what Fidelity does. They buy stock in the name of your IRA, and then they hold the stock certificate. We're just holding a different type of document.
Just to pivot a little bit, had one question that just popped up. We have folks who also are doing international investing. Mm-hmm. Does the approach change in any way if the investment, for example, is a short-term rental in Mexico, as an example?
As far as the rules go, no. I mean, the IRS rules allow you to buy property anywhere. We actually have a lot of clients that will buy property internationally. Now, one thing that's different as far as the process goes, because we're dealing with international wires and there's some additional risk there, what we will suggest to a client is set up an LLC, and we do this for a lot of clients even that invest, domestically, but set up an LLC. You can be the you can be the manager of that LLC, okay, as the IRA owner, and we'll have your IRA as the member, or multiple IRAs as multiple members of an LLC. From that point on, you'll have a bank account associated with the LLC, and you can set whatever wires you want, right, internationally or domestically. But because it's international, we prefer that the client take on that liability. We don't want to be sending international wires for people. It's just a lot of risk on our part.
For sure.
So it can be done, yes. There's just probably an extra step in there where we're going to set up an LLC first. IRAs are the members, you're the manager, and then on you go.
Sometimes we'll hear the term kicked around in the industry, a checkbook LLC. Is that kind of what this is?
Checkbook IRA LLC. We're one of the few companies that will do it.
Yeah.
Okay, but we've got an attorney's office, KKOS Lawyers, that sets up hundreds of these. They're very, very familiar with the IRA laws, IRA lingo. So I wouldn't recommend setting one up with just your attorney down the block or your brother who's an attorney. You've got to deal with a law group that's familiar with IRA rules.
So just since you brought up KKOS, it's a sister company for Directed IRA. Can you just tell us a little bit about the services they provide?
Yeah, they provide services like entity structuring. They do some tax consults, asset, protection. Very, very good group. They're, our founders, Matt Sorensen and Mark Kohler, are both, partners of that. So we have a lot of clients that work with both entities, that work with KKOS, because we do have a lot of clients that are small business owners. So they'll have a lot of asset protection type things through KKOS, but they run all their self-directed IRA investments through Directed Trust Company.
And so if we've talked about a number of different strategies today. If we're talking about the very, very simple strategies where the accounts themselves can just act, those certainly are available.
Yeah.
And then if somebody needed a more substantial entity structure for any variety of reason, KKOS is kind of the underpinning to that.
Yeah, and really it comes down to the clients, what they want to set up. We by no means say they have to set up. International is just one different one.
Sure.
But we have clients that will set up the Checkbook IRA LLC just for investments here in the States. Usually clients that are doing that, they're more active. They're buying a lot of investments. So a lot of times they just want to take out the headache of having to send us all the paperwork. They just do that on their own. But one thing I want to make crystal clear to people, you still have to work within the rules of the IRS.
That's right.
You can't use that Checkbook IRA LLC to pay your way to Vegas or buy things or pay your electric bill, things that you're not supposed to do with your IRA. Those rules don't go away just because you set up a Checkbook IRA LLC.
That's right.
Yeah.
The last point about the international thing, this is probably obvious, but you're still going to need legal support in that jurisdiction that can competently transact whatever transaction you're trying to accomplish. So, an attorney that's competent in how to take title to something in the Dominican Republic or Mexico or, Peru or, whatever it happens to be, you still need that legal advice on the ground in those municipalities.
So we've covered,
man, we ran a lot.
I can't wait to watch this one again. We've covered a lot today. Of course, want to give anyone in the audience kind of a last minute chance here to submit a question with Nate here. I can't, I'd have 5 pages of notes, so I'm sure there's questions out there. But while we give them another minute, maybe just kind of update them on what we've got going on the next couple weeks. It's going to be a little bit of a quieter time, but just what's going on in our worlds outside of inside the walls 9 to 5.
Yeah. I was actually sitting, so we had our meetup. We had the meeting after the meeting, which is always like an opportunity just to talk through some more things and understand things more deeply. Whatever real estate meetup you're going to locally, there's normally a meeting after the meeting, and you really want to make sure you get invited to that. So that's one thing. But anyways, I was sitting at ours last night and just going, wow, you and I have we've just finished running the gauntlet in a lot of serious ways. So the next couple of weeks for us are relatively slow, which is nice. We've got the office.
It's just the pendulum swinging, though.
It is, right? But office hours coming up the next 3 weeks. We were looking at that. The topics are really cool. So you guys will see those posted on the story. But that's at 2433 The Plaza from 3 to 5 every Thursday. If you guys haven't made it out to one of our office hours, we'd really love to see you there. It's a very informal engagement there. No sales pitch, I promise you, but we'd love to get together and talk about what you're working on in your business and how we can either give you encouragement to do those deals or how we can even partner together to complete the deals. We just completed a couple of JV deals with some people, so that was pretty cool. Yeah, I don't know, man. I'm actually kind of looking forward to catching our breath, and the business has a lot going on, so you and I operationally have a lot of things to focus on over the next couple of weeks. So yeah, looking forward to that.
Just pulling it up here for the topics the rest of the month. We did fundamentals of wholesaling yesterday.
That was great.
Next week, we are doing building a successful real estate team. So can't wait to learn that from other people because clearly we don't know what we're doing.
Oh, and then the following week, I know what that is. So
learning from real estate investing failures.
Ooh,
So
I like
definitely
that
come
one.
to us for that one. We got y'all on that one. But no, you know, Ed and I have kind of, and being fully transparent, we utilize ChatGPT to kind of sparse out the topics a bit more because we were touching a lot of things pretty regularly. And we're kind of circling back now to some of our OG topics that we used to talk about a lot. So I'm kind of excited to get back into the groove of kind
The
of what we
fundamentals.
built office hours on in
That's
terms
right.
of fundamentals. So
Well, I mean,
there should be some good topics.
especially the failures one, man. You know, I know it doesn't make great content for YouTube and Instagram, but when we get a chance to talk about where we've made mistakes and where things have gone wrong, I really hope that people can take note of what pitfalls to avoid themselves. And I mean, you know, if you think you've got this all figured out in real estate, it's going to humble you really, really quick.
You learn more from mistakes than you do from home runs.
My coach says to me, he says, those are the things you remember.
Yeah.
You remember those lessons.
Yeah.
You know, you getting away with something, not just an example, like you rehab a house and you leave a vanity in place, but the house ends up selling, you know, you don't learn any lessons there, right?
Right.
The one time you try and get away with something too aggressive, the market will teach you and you'll remember that one real quick.
Yeah.
I think the cool thing about that conversation is we learn that the failure doesn't always mean rock bottom. You know, there's a lot of ways to mitigate risk even on the way down with a loss. So it's cool to talk through. Some people had a pretty bad loss. Some people had a softer loss. Let's talk about strategies that were utilized on both so that we can turn that small loss into a small win and that big loss into a small loss. You know, it's a pretty productive conversation. So excited for that one. Ed will have lots to share.
It's the truth about it. Nate,
which means I have a lot to share
That's
too.
right.
I'm just being funny, but
Yeah. Nate, where can folks find you? What's the best way to follow Directed IRA? Get in touch with you guys.
Go to directedira.com. Go to our Learn page if you want to stay in contact with us. We do workshops, we do webinars, we do podcasts. Join our newsletter. We don't sell much. We just basically provide education. We have a newsletter every single week, and we're doing probably 2 or 3 things a week now online where people can watch. Or just go to YouTube. We've got a YouTube channel. We just kind of started it, so it's still relatively new. But there's a lot of good education there. So watch it at your leisure. We also have some live events coming up. But so just if you join our newsletter, you'll stay in touch. That's the easiest way to do that.
And people who have been involved with your sphere of influence recently, or people that our community would certainly know. So Pace Morby was on some of that content recently. Amy, you've been featuring her pretty heavily and what she's sharing about raising private lending. So just some really, really cool people. Jason, you know, just lots of really cool operators. You guys are doing a great job of attracting some really, really capable people.
Appreciate that.
Well, Nate, thanks so much for joining us today, man. This was one of the best we've had. Really enjoyed you speaking super knowledgeably about all this and opening my eyes to some things, and I already knew a bunch. So thank you for that. Ed, I know you, so we'll see each other in the future. But thanks, guys, for joining. Have a great rest of your week. Make some moves, make some money, and we'll see you guys next Friday.